Alright, so this is a instruction video for my Astro 8 class on using Photoshop to finish up your imaging project. So you've already sent it through CCDOps and turned your raw image into a TIFF file that is color, and then you've taken your stack of images. Typically you have 3, 4, maybe 5 images, and you've run them through Registacks, and with Registacks you've stacked them all on top of each other, and so you've reduced some more noise that way. And then the final artistic touches are done in Photoshop. So my guidelines when I ask students to produce their final image is the guiding principle should be something like this. I want my image to look like it was taken with a bigger telescope at a darker site with better atmospheric conditions and a longer exposure. Basically, to be itself, but only better. So we are not looking to go wild and crazy and turn it into a psychedelic thing, change all the colors around. No. You can do all that on your own, of course. You've taken the image, and so it's yours to keep. But for the image that you turn in for grading, these are the criteria that I want you to think of. Okay, so I've brought in an image of M51, the Whirlpool galaxy here, to start with. And the first thing that I want to do before I even think about sizing it is I want to make sure that the framing is right. I want to make sure that I'm happy with the cropping. So you can look at this and you can say, well, gee, the galaxy looks a little small. I'd kind of like it to look bigger. Now, you could then use the crop command up here. So you click the upper left there, rectangular marquee. Now you could try and go all the way down to something like that. But the danger in doing that is if your resolution isn't good enough, you're really going to see all of the imperfections of the quality of the atmosphere at Cabrillo College Observatory. So I recommend not going that far. So I'm going to right-click, deselect, and start over. All I'm really going to do is I'm just going to try and center it. So this and this are the only interesting things in the photo. There's nothing over here of any interest. And this star, in fact, is positively distracting. So we definitely want to get rid of that. So a good photographer whom I know and is very popular on the web, earns a living advising people on cameras and photography, and whom I've worked with many times on photo workshops, Ken Rockwell. Go to kenrockwell.com and you can see all of his great advice. And one thing that he has said that I remember from one of our early trips is that it's too tempting for photographers to try and include too much in their photo, and your eye doesn't really know where to go. Now in this case here, it's pretty obvious where the eye wants to go. We're not photographing a large complex nebula. We're not photographing a galaxy cluster. There's really just these two galaxies right next to each other, and there's nothing else of particular interest in the photo. So in that case, you're going to want to photo just those. You're going to want to frame it just for those. So I look at this and say, well, is there any really faint stuff that I want to make sure and not lose? I can see a nice tidal tail going out here. It's pretty subtle, but I might be able to pull it out of the sky, so I kind of want to keep that. So I don't think I want to crop anything on this side. But over here, this looks kind of uninteresting and maybe even a little competitive with this bright star here. So I think what I'll do is I will, and also up on top there, notice this is below center. So here's what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to center it like that. Okay, then I go to Image and Crop. and that keeps only what's inside the marquee. Then I right click, deselect, and that goes away. Okay, at that point I have what I think is going to be my final sized image. I've still got all my processing to do, but I've got the composition that I want. Do I really? You know, I think I want to slice a little more off the top here. Image, crop. Right click, deselect. That's a little better. Okay, so now I want to worry about the size. So here's what I do. I go to Image, Image Size, and then I try and remember, well, what were the requirements that Rick asked in the project sheet? And what I asked is if you're going to use inches, this is for your gallery version. We're not worried about your print version because, frankly, in this semester, where everything's closed because of the virus, you can't go get it printed anyway. So we're not going to worry about a printed image here. We're only going to worry about the gallery image. But I want your gallery image to pretty much fill the frame when somebody clicks on the thumbnail and brings up the full-size image. I don't want it to be too big. I don't want it to be too small. I want it to roughly fill the frame of whatever computer might pull it up. We don't want to be too demanding of the computer that pulls it up. My recommendation is we put in 16 inches. So you can change this, you see, from inches to pixels or centimeters or millimeters or points or picas and columns. You know, there's all kinds of units here. The only ones I've ever used is pixels and inches. That's all I've ever really needed. Now, if you're in Europe, I suppose you'll say inches. That is so primitive. Why aren't you using centimeters? Okay, well, you know, but inches is what inches, because we live here in California. So then I click OK. And it's now resized. And you say, well, Rick, that doesn't fill the frame. Yeah, and the reason is because way down here at the bottom on the lower left is the scale that it put it in the Photoshop frame. So if you really want to see it full size, you've got to click that up to 100. So you have to type in 100, and you click Enter, and now it's full size. However, full size actually overfills the frame in the Photoshop window, so I actually usually like to take that down to maybe 77 or something, just because it's easy to type. There we go. So that's good. It's 16 inches across at 72 pixels per inch. Let me pull up image size again just so you get that right. See the resolution here? So we want the resolution to be just 72 pixels per inch. Yeah, you could go much higher, but there's no point. If you're just looking at it on the internet, 72 pixels per inch is just fine. And the bigger you make this number, then the bigger the image is in megapixels, and it just, you know, fills up hard drive space that you don't really need. We are not at the top of Mauna Kea, and so our stars are not going to be pinpoints and perfect, and so we don't really need unbelievable 300 dots per inch, you know, resolution. 72 is just fine. Alright, so now I've got it centered, and I've got it the right scale and the right size. And now I'm ready to look at the photo and say, okay, what is it I don't like about my photo? So here's one thing you never want to do around me. You never want to say, Rick, is this good enough? Okay, I hate that. And of course, you want me to like what you say because I'm the one who's going to give you your grade. So instead, you say, Rick, God, you know, my sky, it looks all kind of peppery with grain. It's grainy, and all the grains have like a red, green, or blue color to them. And it looks, you know, it's like it's just noisy. The sky is noisy. What do we do about that, Rick? How do I fix that? That's the kind of question I like hearing, because then I can say, well, here's how you fix that. You go to Image, Adjustments, and Curves. one of the most commonly used functions, no matter whether it's an astrophoto or not. So I'm going to drag it over here. And the meaning of this command is in this line, this 45-degree angle line. Along the x-axis it says input, along the y-axis it says output. And as a 45-degree line, you see every tone, every shade of gray is rendered on the y-axis as exactly as it was input. But you can change this. See, you can take the input curve and make it, well, the input-output curve, you can change the curve. Let me just do it. Okay, rather than try to explain it here at 11 o'clock at night. So what I'm doing is I'm just grabbing onto that line, turning it into a curve, and I'm dragging it down. And what it's doing, you see, is it's taking the dark side, the dark pixels, the darker tones in your photo, and making them darker still, you see, because it's getting dragged below the sideways 45-degree line. Okay, so that's how you darken your sky. You just go into curves, you grab it somewhere. Now in this case our galaxy is really bright, so we don't have any real problem trying to pull it out of the sky. If we were trying to do something like a faint nebula, like the Horsehead Nebula or something, then we'd have to be pretty careful about exactly how we manipulated our curve to try and pull that thing out of the sky. But in this case, it's actually not that hard. But so you could grab different places here. So I've already fixed that point. I could grab a point up here and now make it do that. But now the galaxy is looking blown out, so I don't think I really want to do that. I might leave it below the line, but closer. The main goal here was to darken the sky. So then I just want to look at my tones. Are those spiral arms bright enough to, be about right? And I'd say, yeah, I think so. That looks decent. So then I click OK. And then I ask, okay, well, what else don't I like? Gee, it still looks pretty grainy, Rick, and there's all these green pixels. So let me remind you how CCD ops converts to color, and basically how our ST2000 XCM camera works. It has a filter mask over it, and there's 2 million pixels in this picture, but each 2x2 array of pixels has a different filter over it. So there's 2 greens, a red, and a blue in every little 2x2 set. And so the software will take the filtered image and it'll then render one color for that whole 2x2 set by combining red, green, and blue. And then it'll go one step further and it will smooth over the neighboring pixel, so it won't really assign the same color to every pixel, but it'll determine the color for that 2x2 set, and then it'll do it for a neighboring set, and then it'll smooth over so that you don't see any edges to your color. It's pretty slick. It's a good way to do it, and then you just have to take your one set of photos instead of taking a whole bunch of photos with different filters, and then who knows, maybe clouds will come in, or an airplane will go over, or something will go wrong in one of those, and then one of your color sets is going to be different. So I really like the filter mask approach, and that's one reason that's what we've got here at Cabrillo College, is a set of the old, they're kind of old now, but I still like them, the ST2000 and the ST4000 cameras. Okay, it is grainy, but what I was about to say was there's green pixels in here. Now, normally you can't really get away with getting rid of one color, but in this case we kind of can. We can get rid of the green, and here's how we do that. See, here's the thing. Stars are thermal radiators. they're either going to be bluish, or they're going to be whitish, or they're going to be reddish. Red, white, and blue. That's what stars are. There's no greens. Okay, if you see a green star, something's wrong. Either it's a planetary nebula, or you're looking at Neptune, or something weird. Okay, stars do not look green, ever. So we can get away with the following. So we're going to go to Adjustments, Hue, and Saturation. And where it says Master here, we're going to put it on green. And then the saturation of the greens in this photo, we're going to take it down. Now you could take it down all the way. I think I'll leave a little bit, just because. And then you might look and say, okay, do I want to amplify any more colors? Now the spiral arms of this early type spiral, or late type spiral, excuse me, are genuinely blue, and there is red, intense red blotches in here from ionized hydrogen H-alpha emission. And so there is genuine reds and blues here, and it would be kind of nice to get those amplified. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to put it back on master, and now I'm going to saturate all the colors. But now look at what happens if I just go hog wild. Ugh, that's terrible. You don't want to do that. Subtle, subtle. What you want to be thinking is, how can I make my picture better, but not have somebody look at it and say, ugh, what did he do to this picture? He overdid this and he overdid that, and he's clearly run this through Photoshop. You kind of don't want people to be even thinking that you ran it through Photoshop. You want them to be thinking that you just took it with a bigger telescope and a better sight, darker, and etc. Okay? So we're going to just amp the colors a little bit. As soon as it gets to be too much, I'm going to stop. Oh, that's too much. I'll go back a little. You know, it's a bit of an artistic choice. I think I'm going to put it at about 19. Alright, so now I've amped the colors some. Well, we've also got little red blotches here and there. I'm going to save those for the last. Here's what I'm going to do instead for right now. I'm just going to be asking, how can I get rid of the grain? So we have Astro Tools, Astronomy Tools, a set of Photoshop actions. They're what we used to call in the old days macros, a whole long list of commands, and they all accomplish one goal. So I'm just going to show the astronomy tools because that's the only ones we really need. Let's just put this like that. There we go. So what do we got here? We got space noise reduction. Let's try that. So the way you execute it is you highlight it so it is covered in a gray bar, and then to execute all the commands that reduce space noise, you go down here and you find the little well, I hope that's showing up in the recording box I have, but there's a little play button. It's a little rightward pointing triangle, and you click that. And it looks a little smoother. Now, when the software author wrote these, he wrote them so that he intended you to be able to do them maybe twice, maybe 3 times. He didn't want to overdo it for each time, because what if you actually wanted to accomplish that, but you wanted to do it much more subtly without, overdoing it. So you want to do these commands, but do them subtly. So often you can do these twice. It's still a little grainy. Let's try it and hit it again. Okay, that's better. Sometimes if you overdo it, then you might want to sharpen it later. I don't think I'm going to do any sharpening yet. I think I'm going to try again to maybe make the sky a little darker. I'm going to go back in and try curves again. And by the way, in case you're wondering, we're not going to be able to make this look like it was taken by the Hubble Space Telescope. Okay, there's limits of what you can do. And it's just a bit of an artistic choice. I don't like you to make your sky pitch black, because if it's pitch black, I wonder, what did we lose? What did we lose? That's the faint outer parts of our deep sky object that now are gone because the sky got darkened to pitch black. So I like my sky to be a dark, dark gray. Unfortunately, because it's so pixelated, it really does look like sand here. You really want to smooth that over, but hard to do when the sky still has some grayness to it. I'll go ahead and keep that. Let's try space noise reduction. No, let's try less crunchy, more fuzzy. Let's see what that does. I also like the way these Photoshop actions were named, because you don't have to guess, like, what do they do. You know what? I don't like that. So here's how you undo an action. You click on the history. This is the history of everything you've done. And what you'll notice is every time you execute one of those actions, you get a little triplet that all look the same. Paste, name change, merge down. Paste, name change, merge down. Paste, name change. See? So to get rid of that single action, I got to go up to paste. I got to right click. I got to delete. That'll back me up. Okay, now I go back to actions, and I wonder, what can I do here? Well, there is some native things in Photoshop we could try. Let's go into filter. We could do a Gaussian blur. I wonder what that'll do. Well, that helped. So Gaussian blur kind of takes sharp points and turns them into little blur balls. Now you might say, well, yeah, but that'll defocus my stars too, won't it, Rick? It might, yeah. But we've got another command that can try and deal with that. Let's try that again. Gaussian blur. Okay. Good. So now let's. It is looking a little blurrier. So let's try space noise reduction one more time. And then after that, I'm going to try to sharpen it back up. If you get it smooth enough before you start sharpening, it won't remember where were the little pixels that were so annoying before. So that's starting to look a little more satiny. Kind of nice. Now another nice one is local contrast enhancement. I'm not sure I'm going to want to do that right now, but I'm going to try it. Let's see. Click on that. Execute. Do I like that? Well, maybe. I guess I do. It shows off these dust lanes in the middle of the spiral arms better. So I'll keep it. But I think what I really wanted to do was sharpen. So here I can do filter. I can do sharpen. And I like to use, well, there's different ones you can use depending on what it is that made the blur. You might have motion blur. You might have shake reduction. You might have just edges that are a problem. Edges are not our problem, so I'm going to try unsharp mask. And you can change. I always like to leave the radius pretty small, like 1 pixel or maybe even a little less than 1 pixel. Always I put the threshold down at 0. But for the amount of sharpening, again, you can crank it to what you think you can get away with. 246%, that's a lot. I think that's probably too much. Let's crank that back. That looks okay. Don't take these numbers as something that you necessarily have to follow. Again, it totally depends on the picture. These are just options for your object. Now, if you've got a really dim nebula, you might want to consider this one. That's not our situation here, so I'm not going to use this. But lighten only DSO, that's the deep sky object, and dim the sky. Oh, no, dim the stars. We don't want to do that here. Our galaxy is already plenty bright. You can also enhance the DSO and reduce the stars. It's a little bit different. Color blotch removal. Let's try that, see what happens. What we don't want is for it to think that any of our H alpha regions or any of our starburst regions in the spiral arms are actually color blotches that need to be stamped out. So I'm going to really stare at this carefully while I execute this and be very open to the possibility of undoing it if it gets rid of any of my good stuff. Okay, we love late type galaxies. They've got all kinds of beautiful detail and color. Yeah, that was good. So what I did is I got rid of some of those individual pixels of color blotch. So that's looking pretty good. What else would I do? Is there anything else that I can do? We haven't tried make stars smaller yet. Let's do that. Make stars smaller. And then we click. What it should do is it should just make your stars smaller. And it did. I like that. If you like it, you know, too much is never enough. Isn't that what they used to say in the 80s? Actually, you can't overdo each of these, but sometimes you want to just keep hitting it until it really starts to show some kind of pathologies. Now, my smallest stars really are sharply focused. That's the most important thing. You don't want your big stars to be totally focused because then they're going to not look as bright. They're supposed to be a little bit bigger because, you know, they're bright stars. They spilled over into more pixels. That looks good. I don't think I want to hit that anymore. Okay. I didn't get the chance to show you much on the left side here. But here, let's zoom way in. So that's at 77% now. Let's go to like 333%. Just so I can show you some other stuff you can do. Let's pan around and see if we can find any ugly bad pixels. Boy, you know, I don't see any. This photo is already too good. Everything I see in here looks like a real star. That even looks like a distant galaxy. See that? Way distant galaxy. Kind of cool. Boy. Well, I can still show you how to play with this. I'd really like to find something that needs to be stamped out, but I don't see anything that needs to be stamped out. This image is just too good. But let me just show you. Just to show you. So, see this red star here? Suppose you could tell that it was not a star, but it was actually a bad pixel, a hot pixel. It got spilled over into even some neighboring pixels. It was deep red, or it was perfectly blue, or it was one of the three primary colors that are the filter mask here. Okay, so that's not that uncommon. With the steps we did before, we managed to stamp pretty much all that out. But sometimes there's stuff that is left over. I'm just going to ask you to pretend that this star is a bad star, bad pixel. So here's how you get rid of bad pixels. On the left side here, you see that little stamp, like a stamp that you'd stamp a passport with. It's called the clone stamp. So you want to click on the clone stamp, and whoa, our clone stamp circle's way too big. Here's how you adjust the size up here. Let's make that not 44 pixels, but maybe 10 pixels. Okay? So here's how I get rid of this thing. I grab some nearby sky, I hit the Alt key, I click, and now I've just grabbed that circle of sky. Then I go over here and I paste it right on top of the star. And I click again. Boom, my star's gone. So you can grab pieces of elsewhere, put them right over the top of something that's, not supposed to be there, an error of some sort, and fix it that way. There's another way to fix things. So suppose you had, okay, so see this area here? Suppose that blueness was really some ugly purple blotch that we didn't get rid of somehow. I mean, it might be real. It might be a star formation region in that galaxy. But let's just assume that it's not supposed to be there. But it's not so easy to paste over another part of the galaxy to do that. So there's another alternative, and that is the healing brush. So it's a little bit up here, and you spot healing brush. So you click that, and you come over here, and you just sort of move it around a little teeny bit, and it sort of smooths over. It takes neighboring pixels and it just kind of moves them around. And also notice here how sharp this is. For healing brush, typically you don't want it so hard. You want to make it fuzzier looking, so you kind of take it down to about there. And now if you do it again, here, let's get rid of this guy here. Well, no, we could get rid of... See that border that's now in there? It's like there's a darker circle on top. It's not really perfect, but if instead I just click around here and move a little bit, I mean, I can really blur over a whole big region. So this circle's really too big. I mean, I'm almost sorry I did that, but you can kind of see what I'm aiming at. You can make this pretty small if you want. 7 pixels. Here, let's get rid of this star right here with the healing brush. So we just kind of brush over it a little bit, and it's gone. Okay, and we didn't have to do any clone stamping. Okay, anything else over here that... So there's a gradient filter here. So if this, well, let's take this back down to 77%. It's too big. So if sometimes there's a red or a blue edge to some photos for reasons that are not totally clear to me. It might have to do with frost on the window if you cool too quickly and you don't have enough drying power left in your desiccant if it needs to be baked. Anyway, if you have a color just on one side, you could try this gradient filter to remove it. We don't have that on this photo, so I'm not going to do that. Yeah, these are all things you would typing, you can type on your image if you want. You can draw lines. You can just grab a hold of it with the hand. But typically I don't need to do any of that. Sometimes you might want to use the magnetic lasso. So if you grab that, I could, for example, try and draw a border around the whole galaxy by just kind of painting things here. And it's magnetic, meaning it kind of knows where the tone or the color changes a lot. It kind of figures out that's really what you're trying to do. And so you could kind of try and go around the whole galaxy. Do this real quick because I'm not really going to use this. But see, now your whole galaxy is enclosed, and then you could do image adjustments, and you could do, curves only inside that area, or hue saturation only in that area, or color balance. Okay. But we don't need to do that, so I'm going to deselect, get rid of it. I actually think that's a good image. I think we're done. So you don't typically use all kinds of there's a lot of commands in Photoshop. There's way too many to try and teach in one little thing here. And of course, Photoshop, learning and knowing Photoshop was not a requirement for Astro 8. So I just teach you kind of the basics and a limited set of things that you can do. There is another command up here though that might be useful. You should probably know about it. Light pollution removal. Light pollution removal enhanced. Okay, so we don't really have a problem with that with this image, but you might if you were shooting something far down in the west over Santa Cruz, or you're shooting something right over campus and there's some street lamps that are up there in the horde area that if you're shooting right over that, they might possibly show up. So you can try that, and what it tries to do is identify light pollution like mercury vapor wavelengths or sodium light vapor wavelengths, and then try and pull those down. Okay. We don't need to do that here, so I'm not going to do it. Now you might be wondering, okay, so Rick, we did space noise reduction. What about this one? Deep space noise reduction. Well, you know what? Of all the years I've been using this, I can't see any difference between using one or the other. There probably is a difference. I'm sure there's a difference. I just don't know what it is. In terms of actually using it, I haven't actually found any difference in the look of my photos whether I use one or the other. So I've just gotten into the habit of using space noise reduction in general. Okay, so then, now if you've managed to do any other size changes along the way, you always want to do, at the end, you want to save your image, and you want to save it twice. You go Image, well, no, first you're ready to save it, File, and you do Save As. And so you would save this as, let's say, I'm going to go ahead and save it just for the heck of it. I'll call it Demo. And see how it says TIFF file? Because it came in as a TIFF file. Usually we want to just go with JPEG. If you're going to print it, or if you're going to put it up in the gallery, JPEGs are totally fine. So then we click Save. And it'll ask you this, quality, yeah, 11, 10, so it's all fine. Saves a little bit of disk space if you go lower on the quality scale. I haven't really noticed any difference as long as the quality is not down at 1 or 2 or something. Okay, now you want to save this again, but you want to save it as the thumbnail version. Because when I make the gallery pages for our class, what I like to do is have little thumbnails so you can fit them all on, they're small enough that you can see what the guy photographed, but you also can see lots and lots of them. So you You can see most of the class on one single look. So we're going to make a thumbnail out of this. So we do image size. And now the way I do thumbnails is I make the width or the height, whichever one is bigger, whichever is the bigger, I make that one 3 inches. So there, now it's 3 inches. Then I click OK. Now it gets small. Now I do again, File, Save As. I'll keep the same name. Whoops, that's TIFF. I want JPEG. So where's my demo? There's my demo. But I'm going to add a -T. That's my nomenclature for the thumbnail. The closer you obey my typical things, the easier it's going to be for me to see and know what you did and grab the right one and post it into our gallery. Something I always like to do, so the whole world can enjoy your photos. And also I can enjoy looking at them while I grade them. Okay, then I click Save. Again, you get this. You click OK. And for this particular class, Spring 20, where we're not going to print, then that's all you do. Now, if you're going to do a print also, then before you, well, here, I'm going to step backwards. Stepping backwards is the way you want to back up. If you make your image small and then you realize, oh, you know what, I'm not really quite ready for reducing the image yet. There's another fix-up I need to do. Here's what you don't want to do. What you don't want to do is say, oh, well, I'll just go to image size and I'll crank it back up. No, because you've already reduced it, and now you're taking a less resolved image and you're expanding it back up, and you're going to lose quality. Instead, you literally want to go backwards, as if you never reduced it. And there is a way to do that. You click Edit and step backwards, just like that. And that'll undo, literally, what you did. Okay. So, let's see. Why did I do that? Oh, there was something else I was going to suggest that you do, and now I can't remember what it was. Oh, right, the print. So if you want to do a print, then that's when, if it's a really nice image, and if you were taking it to a pro photo place like we used to have in Santa Cruz, and Bay Photo has kind of just turned into I wouldn't even call it a prosumer place. It's really just might as well be a Walgreens, okay? But if you had a real pro photo place and you would take it down and you'd have them make a really fine print, then you probably should have it as a lossless, uncompressed image, and then you'd probably want to leave it as a TIFF file, and you'd also want to have the image size be not 72 resolution, but more like, well, if it was really good, maybe 300 pixels per inch. That's going to be a pretty big image. So the last few years I've lately been advising people just go to 150, that's fine. I mean, again, the quality of the seeing at Cabrillo Observatory is not that great, so we're not going to have exquisitely detailed pictures. This one's actually, is pretty good. You really don't see images that are much better from Cabrillo than this. Okay, but that's what you do. You'd increase the resolution, and then when you save it, you would leave it as a TIFF file. Alright, well, I am done. So now if I can figure out how to end this recording.